Hi, good morning, FIATech members and FIATech friends, and happy Tuesday to all of you. I'm Nicole Testa Boston, the Deputy Director at FIATech, and I'm glad that you are all able to join us this morning for FIATech's weekly Technology Tuesday webinar series featuring a future casting series this summer. Today we have an exciting hour set aside to discuss innovation and economic prosperity with Dr. Robert Atkinson and Stephen Uzel. So with that, I want to turn this over to Fran Raybuck, who's the Director of Intelligent Infrastructure Labs at Bentley Systems. Fran has been integral in putting together this future casting series for us this summer and put us in contact and made the introduction here with the folks at the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. Most of you know Fran Raybuck. He leads our Roadmap Element 4 area for our roadmap, looking at construction technologies. Is working diligently right now on the RFID cookbook, and has some plans for some new programs and projects in the future. So with that, Fran, thank you very much, and let me turn that over to you.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. I'm excited about today's presentation, especially since it deals with innovation and it's part of my job. I know many of you, it is also probably part of your job, although you may not know it or even realize you're doing it every day. You know, in the topic we have today, innovation and economic prosperity, everybody wants economic prosperity, but everybody probably isn't as sure as how much work and effort should be devoted to innovation and what role it plays in the bottom line. The panelists we have today have actually done a recent study comparing the innovation capacity of over 40 nations, and what's disconcerting is the United States has fallen to 6th in innovation capacity, and even more concerning is it's ranking dead last in enhancing its innovation capacity over the last decade. So today we have two speakers here, Dr. Robert Atkinson. He is the President of Information Technology and Innovation Foundation and is the founder, and he works in the Washington, D.C. based policy think tank there. He's the author of the State of the New Economy Index series and the book, The Past and Future of America's Economy, Long Waves of Innovation, The Power Cycles of Growth. He has extensive background in technology policy, has conducted groundbreaking research projects on technology and innovation, and is a valued advisor to state and national policymakers and a popular speaker on innovation policy nationally and internationally. Before joining ITIF, he was the Vice President of the Progressive Policy Institute and the Director of PPI's Technology and New Economy Project. There he wrote various research reports on technology and innovation policy on topics like broadband telecommunications, internet telephony, universal service, e-commerce, e-government, middleman opposition to e-commerce, privacy, copyright, RFID, and smart cards, and the role of IT in homeland security. Previous to that, he was also the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Economic Policy Council, and he was also the Project Director at the former Congressional Office of Technology Assessment. While at OTA, he wrote the report, The Technology Reshaping of Metropolitan America. I think the OTA office is no longer in existence, but I remember getting reports in there, and I thought it was very, very informational and useful. His co-speaker joining him is Stephen Uzel, and he is a senior analyst with ITIF with a focus on international information technology competitiveness, and also national innovation policies. He comes to ITIF from Peer Insights. This was an innovation and research consulting firm that he co-founded in 2003. And at Peer Insight, he co-founded the Global Service Information Consortium, published 8 research papers in service innovation, research national service innovation, and he also worked in the new service development group at NASDAQ stock. So Stephen also holds a BS from the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University and an honors certificate from Georgetown's National Business Diplomacy program. I think I've said the word innovation enough in the bios and intro. Know that this is going to be a very innovative presentation today. I'm going to turn it over to you now, Robert. Stephen?
Great. Thank you, Fran and Nicole. Really a pleasure to be invited to share our thoughts with you today. I would start by certainly saying we are not construction industry experts. We're really more, if we will, experts on innovation and innovation policy, particularly with an IT focus. But when you think about construction, I think it's important to recognize that when we think about innovation and IT and all, we certainly don't necessarily think about just Silicon Valley or the software industry or the semiconductor industry. I think it's really important to understand that in the conception of innovation that we and certainly a lot of other folks have, we're really talking about innovation in a wide array of industries and sectors and functions of the economy. So, for example, the retail industry has been one of the more innovative industries in America, and certainly in many cases some of the fastest productivity growth. And so I think it's important to recognize that there are certainly a large amount of opportunities for innovation and IT-enabled productivity in the construction industry. The second component of this, I think, would be there's been a long interest in the construction industry, at least nationally, although it hasn't been that much focus recently. But, for example, back in the 1960s, there was a program established under the Johnson administration that was to provide grants and research support for construction technologies, because the view was that the construction industry was lagging behind on innovation, it was lagging behind on productivity, and that innovation and technology was a possible answer to that. And there were similar efforts, but not very well funded in the Clinton administration, where there was thinking and concern about how do you get innovation in the construction industry. My sense is that that issue could certainly well emerge again from a policy perspective, if for no other reason than if you look at least the public statistics on productivity and construction, they're not very good. Construction industry productivity has not really gone up anywhere near the extent of other industries, and to the extent that we rely on the construction industry for being able to continue to raise productivity and therefore standards of living in the U.S., that's, I think, a challenge. So the other piece I guess I just add on this is that in our view, IT is, and I'll get into this, as sort of this foundational technology system which comes around sort of once every 50 years or so, and happens to be now that that system is an IT system that's really the engine of growth. And so in our view, IT really does provide an amazing array of opportunities for innovation and innovation platforms in all industries, and certainly in construction. So with that, let me start by saying I want to kind of generally just talk a little bit about kind of how Washington thinks about these questions and innovation. Secondly, talk about why innovation is important, and then how innovation is changing, and then this as a study that Fran talked about, where we are on that, and then finally some of the policies and maybe some of the implications in terms of the industry. So let's see. Okay, so I think one way to think about it, and this is probably a little maybe high level, is in Washington right now, Washington essentially gives short shrift to innovation. If you talk to some of the better economic studies, they suggest that upwards of 80, possibly even 90% of per capita income growth, so in other words, 90% of our standard of living improvement is related to innovation, and that's whether it's development of new products and services, or whether it's the adoption of new technologies and new ways of doing things in an industry, including construction. So, for example, pneumatic nail machines, that was an innovation, and it allows higher productivity. So those kinds of things. But in fact, in reality, when you come to Washington, you talk to economists and people who are advising economists, they really don't think about innovation very much, and it's in part because of the kind of dominant view of economists that largely think that the economy grows by more capital being accumulated, or that the major thing to worry about is the business cycle. And sure, right now that's the major thing to worry about, but pretty soon we won't have to be worrying about we won't be worrying about the business cycle. We'll be worrying about growth. So I would argue there's a new way of thinking about economics, which you could call innovation economics. This is a picture of Joseph Schumpeter, a famous economist from the 40s, who was basically a pioneer of this, if you will. But in the last decade, there's a lot of economists now who say, wait a minute, innovation is really, really important. We need to put it at the center of our economic policies. And secondly, that it just doesn't happen. One famous conventional economist once said that innovation is like manna from heaven. It just happens. There's nothing really the government can do to get more of it or less of it. It just is there. Whereas a kind of innovation economics approach would say, wait a minute, innovation is not manna from heaven. It's a thing that's produced just like anything else, and we can get smart about how we get more of it. So let me just skip through that. Okay. So as I said before, innovation is not just about technology industries. It's about all industries, including construction. It's not just about science and R&D. It's about all aspects of economic policy. So, for example, one could make a strong case that federal procurement policy could play a role in construction innovation and construction productivity. If the feds were smart buyers of construction services, they could possibly move and spur innovation and IT adoption and other things like that. So it's not just about, as I said, not just about science. And so our view is that we need to put innovation at the center, including in all industries. We need to be thinking strategically about innovation in particular sectors. So, for example, we're beginning to do that with healthcare. We're having conversations that are going on in Washington about how you can drive innovation in the healthcare sector, particularly with IT. But we're having, those conversations are going on in transportation, for example, with how we could use what's called ITS, Intelligent Transportation Systems in transportation, a whole set of sectors along those lines. And then the component of that is we think the government can play a key enabling role in a lot of areas. Whether it's through procurement or technology assistance or other things like that. So why does innovation matter? Certainly innovation matters because it creates new products and services. But I would argue, again, going back to my other point, that innovation is not, as I said, just in about high-tech products. This is a very innovative machine. Doesn't look innovative. Probably that machine looks sort of like probably what it looked like 20 years ago. But it's a very different kind of cotton harvester. It's got the GPS, it's got microwave sensors, RFID, wireless computers. It basically has been able to take a very kind of conventional old economy steel and gears and electronic system and make it into this new digital system. So the CEO of John Deere now says he doesn't make tractors but mobile information factory. So that, I guess, is the big message, if you will, that every industry really now has the ability to be much more innovative through these IT platforms. Another component of that is that innovation is important because better tools drive progress. IT is how you would get better tools, both in terms of developing them and deploying them. So the other reason innovation matters is because it's important for economic growth. I mentioned that before. At least 2/3, up to 90% of innovation of GDP growth is from innovation. But it's also a key factor here, and we didn't put the slides here, I apologize, but there's a very interesting studies been done at MIT and the Sloan Business School and also at Wharton at Penn that look in very great detail at firm adoption of IT, including across all sectors. So I'm assuming that there are construction firms in this studies that these economists, these researchers have done. But one of the clear findings from this work, whether it's Eric Bernholsten at MIT or Lauren Hidd at Penn, is that IT adoption by firms, again, regardless of sector, is positively associated with profitability. So the more firms adopt IT, the more profitable they are. Now, again, that's not to say that every firm that adopts IT is more profitable than every firm that doesn't. There is variation within that sample, but when you put all of the 1,000 or 1,500 firms in this study together, there's a pretty clear relationship between IT and productivity, IT and profitability, and also a very clear relationship between IT and productivity. So it's not. This is something where innovation isn't just important to the country. It also is important to individual firms. Let's skip that. I guess the last point on this is that if you think about the U.S. economy today, it's probably, I would argue, characterized by one overarching factor, and that's fairly strong rates of change and innovation. You know, the economy in the post-war period, really through the 70s and 80s, was a fairly stable economy. It didn't change super fast. There wasn't a lot of disruption. One can argue that that's not certainly the case today. We've got a very, very fast-changing, globalized economy that's being disrupted by technology. Now, maybe that's not true as much in the construction industry, although maybe I'm wrong there, but certainly many sectors you're seeing a lot more entrance from new kinds of players. So whether it's in financial services, new kinds of players coming in, or in logistics, where traditional firms might be displaced by companies like FedEx or UPS, or certainly in manufacturing. So in that sense, I think what we really have to recognize is that in this new economy today, innovation is constant. So maybe there I'll stop and ask Fran or Nicole if there's any questions. Maybe we could take those now, or I can keep going on.
Yes, I do have one question. Given the smart grid efforts now funded, how can we link the IT to the energy information and optimization needs of the smart grid to the end users of energy and show the economic growth potential?
Well, with regard to smart grid, there's a study on our website that we did at the behest of the Obama transition team. It's called The Digital Road to Recovery, and it's an economic model or analysis of the impact of investment in three what we call platform technologies: smart grid, health IT, and broadband. And so there's an analysis in there of smart grid and the economic benefits from investing in the smart grid. So certainly that's kind of one place to look. But I guess the answer would be the other place also is a report we did called Digital Quality of Life, which is on the bottom of our homepage. And there's a chapter in there on IT and energy. There's a lot of different chapters and various things of how IT is improving quality of life, but there's one there on energy, and that goes into a fair amount of detail of what are some of the studies that have shown, including on smart grid, in terms of the economic benefits to users of these technologies. So I guess in terms of smart grid, there are job impacts in the short run, and they're quite sizable from actually building the smart grid. But then there's a whole set of economic benefits with regard to the ability to manage the network better in terms of managing load, the ability to identify in a much more precise way, for example, where outages are. You wouldn't have to have, if there's a power outage, you wouldn't have to sort of report it. This kind of the network would know that automatically. And then the other piece of smart grid I think that's interesting is there's a whole lot of certainly discussion going on about how the smart grid could facilitate, and vice versa, the plug-in hybrid or all-electric cars. So essentially, if you have a smart grid, it makes the case for electric or partial electric vehicles a lot better, because you can charge the vehicle at night ideally if you have a smart grid, you can use time-of-day pricing when you're off peak, which you don't now in most places. So it makes it more economical to have electric cars. But then also you can use those as storage devices to put electricity back into the grid at night. So I don't know if Nicole, if there's any other questions.
I do have one. I have one more question. If we have been trying to address the lack of innovation since the 1960s in construction, why do you think there has been no marked effect? Why is construction so tough to crack?
Well, I guess two answers. One is we haven't taken it seriously. So, for example, the program I mentioned in the 1960s lasted about 3 years with a small amount of money and was eliminated by when the Nixon administration came into office. So, it was a small sort of one-time effort. Some of the efforts in the Clinton administration were more kind of bring all the players together and have some discussions. They weren't serious. The second answer, I guess, would be it may be that really what that the opportunities, if you will, the technology opportunities for significant innovation and productivity gains really have not emerged until the last decade. That most of the advances in construction take place in the 40s, 50s, 60s kind of thing, and kind of mechanical advancements, electromechanical or mechanical, but that the digital advancements really were not possible until the last year. The last part, though, the last reason, again, I'm not a construction expert, so I'm just saying what I know and opinion somewhat, but it seems to me that the other problem with construction is that it's in some ways a little bit like healthcare, in the sense of the healthcare system really is a very dispersed industry with many players, most of whom are small, and where the actions of one player are determined are affected by the actions of another player. So, for example, in construction, in theory, what it seems to me one might want would be some sort of totally integrated IT system where everything would go from design and CAD all the way directly into the materials company who's producing the materials in an automated order way and right on a just-in-time into the construction site, with people on the construction site having handhelds to manage all of that, and maybe even some standards with regard to wireless RFID. That can't be done by one firm alone, and in particular, it's really hard to do that kind of systemic, what you would call system technology or platform technology, kind of a shared technology system that everybody would be able to avail themselves of. It's very hard to do that when you have lots and lots of small firms. One area we were seeing some progress in outside construction, and that's in retail, where you have Walmart as being a big driver of adoption of RFID, radio frequency identification device. They're able to drive that because they're and even there they're having problems, but they're able to be a driver because they're such a big player and can leverage that size to overcome this, what you would call a chicken or egg problem. So I think that's part of it, is the way the industry structure is, and then lastly, one of the ways that you have to get over those challenges, I think, is through some kind of coordination mechanisms. Everybody's got to agree that they're going to adopt the technologies, develop the standards, and those sorts of things. And somebody's got to play that role. Now, in the case of healthcare, it's the government now, and that's frankly why every other country who's ahead of us on health IT, and there are many countries who are way ahead of us on health IT, like the Scandinavians are just amazingly ahead of us. That's because the government took the role of helping to bring industry together and develop standards and fund projects and get everybody up into this new platform, if you will. And I don't see any real evidence that the government here is willing to do that in any helpful way.
Thanks, Rob. That's all I have right now.
Okay, yeah, Rob, I have some questions, but I'll ask them later. I'll let you move on here.
Okay, great. So anyway, so why is innovation different now? And I would argue it's very different. One is that IT now is a key driver of innovation. So I would argue that if you look really at any sector of the economy or any function of the economy, really, you'd see that a large share of the innovations that are coming online have some core component that's related to IT. And the reason is what economists call IT is what's called a general purpose technology. So it's not sort of like one narrow technology that's going to affect one narrow function or one narrow industry. It's, again, this notion that most innovations are small and incremental, but there are these big general purpose technologies, steam power, railroad, electricity, steel being good examples of that. But now IT being this general system, this general purpose technology. So I think one key question then with regard to IT is as this innovative platform that companies can build off of is it, where is it? Are we going to run out of gas as we've run out of gas with every other technology platform and system we've had? They all eventually reach their peak of capabilities. It's very hard to make a circular saw that's any better than the one that was made 10 years ago, let's say. Although actually there is a company that we've written about called SawStop, which is interesting. They're I guess a startup company that's made a saw that if you put your finger in the blade, it'll stop it within 3 kerfs, 3 of the saw teeth. That's an IT innovation there, certainly for safety. But in terms of the actual saw itself, being, you got carbide blades, things like that, they don't get much better than what they have today. So the notion there is IT going to be able to keep driving innovations? And in our view, it certainly will for a while, at least another decade or 2 decades. If you look at the technologies that are being developed, whether it's processors or memory or storage, they just get better and better and better. My son just bought a 32 gigabyte flash drive. So, you think about that, 32 gigs, 5 years ago was an enormous thing, and now it's just sitting around on a thumb drive. So the technology gets better. Talk about many sectors have barely tapped the potential of e-transformation. Certainly that's the case in construction, but it's also the case in a lot of other industries, particularly ones that are either, I guess I would say mostly if you see the ones that haven't gotten as much transformation, I would argue they're the ones with lower levels of competition or industry structures where there's a lot of segmentation and small firms. So certainly things like transportation hasn't made much progress. I would argue healthcare, certainly government itself, and then the other piece is that these applications are growing, more and more people are using it. So an example of Moore's Law, which everybody knows about, but this you can see the ability to put processors on chips and keep getting them smaller and smaller and more powerful is continuing to grow. Give you an example of that, I mentioned this flash drive, but probably people here have Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo Mail. They all give you this amazing amount of storage. If they were to give you that storage today using 1975 technology, it would cost $100 million per user. 1995 technology, $5,500 per user. So these are essentially technology price declines that we've never, ever seen in world history before. And now these technologies are so cheap that people are able to do things with them that you couldn't do before. So give you an example of that, in the Digital Quality of Life report, we wrote about this example where construction workers now are, I don't know how many of them are doing, but certainly some of them are doing it, are putting RFID tags on their tools. So when they leave a construction site, and they put all their tools back in the truck tells them that they've left a tool on the site because it's been sort of checked out but hasn't been checked back in, if you will. Very hard to have done that 5 years ago even, because the RFID technologies were quite expensive. Today they're super cheap and getting cheaper. You can see these are sort of between every 1 to 3 years these technologies get twice as good or half the price. So that's kind of one way to think about this in terms of history. We had this old technology system after World War II. It slowed down. It didn't really do much in the late 70s to early 90s, and now we have this new IT system which is driving productivity and growth. One, I think, interesting piece of this that almost no one has talked about in this current downturn is that productivity growth rates in this downturn are really fundamentally different than they were in the past recessions. 10 times higher productivity growth rates during this recession than in the other recessions we've had after World War II. That's pretty amazing. Now, that's one of the reasons why the job markets aren't as good, because productivity's been so high during a recession. But normally, historically, when we have recessions, productivity goes down or stays the same, doesn't grow because firms are cutting output but not workers. Today, it's very, very different, and so in some ways that's very, very good, because it means when we get out of the recession, we'll have a much bigger economy than we would have had we not done that. So the real question is, where are we going? At some point in time, there'll be this new technology system. Who knows when it'll emerge? Somewhat related to nanotechnology, biotech, but that's very robotics. And that's an interesting technology. When you think about it, robotics could potentially have impacts on the construction industry, but not for another probably 20 years, I would imagine, before the technology gets good enough. Okay, let me skip through that. Let me go back to, I think the other big piece of what's happening today that's different in technology and innovation is that small firms are becoming more important. In the old economy, it was really big firms, Fortune 500 companies, that did most of the innovation. Today, it's small firms. You see that red line. That's the amount of R&D that small firms are doing up through 2000, which is the last year we get data there. And you can see it's growing. So overall, our studies and others show that small and mid-sized firms are becoming more important sources of innovation. Universities are becoming more important sources of innovation. More and more of them are driving innovation. Innovation is becoming more collaborative. It used to be that most innovations in the U.S. came from big firms that just had a research lab and were doing things and came up with an invention. Today, a lot of the innovations are coming from collaborations between big firms, small firms and federal labs and universities and the whole set of things. That's an example there of the amount of award-winning innovations that coming from collaborations as opposed to single firm activity. So maybe there I'll stop again. Also, if there's any other questions that have come in, Fran, since then, or Nicole?
Yeah, I sort of have a question, especially based on, the last comment. I think a lot of times innovation, people picture it as something that they do within their framework to get some technology advantage. As we've seen from other industries, for example, the Human Genome Project, a collaborative open effort, an open source, for example, does help to further innovation. Now, FIATech is sort of a model for some of this, because individually we have competitors that are members, but collectively we work together. So is this part of the new model in innovation, working together to collectively move innovation forward?
I think it is, absolutely. I'm not trying to use the word open source, but certainly open standards in the sense that you can develop the notion of having shared standards that are agreed upon, and then collaboration. So that's been going on in certain industries much more so, for example, in semiconductors with Semitech, and then another effort called the Microelectronics Advanced Research Corporation, which is a collaboration of semiconductor firms. So I think that's absolutely right. Now, one of the reasons for that is if the construction industry were simply just a widget industry where, they just produced widgets and the use of those widgets was not dependent upon anything else. So it was just, you want to use a widget, you buy a widget. That's sort of, a lot of industries are like, the shoe industry is like that, for example. You don't need anything to buy a good shoe or to invent a good shoe. You just invent a better shoe and go ahead and do that. But I would argue the construction industry is different in one sense. It's like some other industries in the sense that the innovations depend upon other firms also being innovative. Now, actually, I want to take back my shoe example, because there is in the shoe industry, there is actually systems technologies or platform technology. So, for example, some shoe companies now have come out with shoes that will talk to your iPod. And so you sort of, track your running and all this. I don't even know how it works, but it is. So
the
again,
Nike, the Bluetooth, yeah.
Yeah, so you couldn't really, I mean, Nike could not develop their own proprietary Bluetooth system and their own proprietary devices that you would carry with your shoe. I suppose they could do that, but it'd be very, very difficult that people wouldn't want to. I've got my Nike thing, but and then I've got my Adidas Bluetooth as well. That only really works because there's a standard called Bluetooth, and there's a sort of a de facto standard of MP3 players, and whether it's iPod or like. So in that sense, what these companies are doing is they're taking advantage of a common platform, and so I think in that sense, that's a big area possibly where, again, I'm not a construction expert, but where you would think that for the construction industry to go forward and to be able to do a lot of innovative things, it really depends upon more than one firm doing it together, and certainly more than one firm even in a part of the chain doing it together, that the whole part of the value chain has got to collaborate at the same time to make these big changes. So yeah, I would definitely agree with that, and that's you see that certainly with a lot of other industries. And Stephen, you've done a lot of work in that area. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure, Rob. This is Stephen Ezel with ITIF. Yeah, I mean, I think well, two things. One of the great things about information technology is that it has the ability to create entirely new business models by shifting who does what within the value chain. So firms across all industries can deploy IT to either take risk from your customers or to even place risk upon your customers' shoulders, and you can do this through very innovative ways by leveraging information technologies to shift and deliver information throughout the value chain where it needs to be done in real time. So I think IT really transforms the ability to create new innovative business models within the construction industry. And to Rob's point about these types of collaborations, I mean, certainly we're seeing this across all industries. Companies realizing that no one is as smart as everyone, that we're going to have to tap into the outside knowledge of our partners and our customers to really unlock their innovation potential. I think here a great example is Procter & Gamble. They introduced the P&G Connect program, which said that 50% of innovation is going to come from outside the firm. And they've just done wonderful things with completely reimagining P&G's innovation capabilities by mandating that at least half of our innovative ideas are going to come from outside the firm. One other thing P&G does there, by the way, is they said if we have intellectual property, we're either going to use it within 3 years or we're going to make it available to the public. So they really said we're going to monetize our IP or we're going to open it up to our partners so we can roll them and thinking about how we can make money from it.
Great, thank you. Nicole, do you have any questions? You want to keep moving on?
I have one quick question. Going back to the last set of questions, too, about innovation coming from more collaborative groups, and we certainly have several organizations in the construction industry. So this question asks, how might the capabilities and work of your foundation, Rob, be applied to inform and drive and energize the construction industry leadership? Are there, and I guess that kind of goes to how are you set up? Are there opportunities to leverage and work together?
Yeah, thank you. Potentially, I mean, we're a nonpartisan, nonprofit think tank, and so we write about a lot of issues, and speak about them, testify, whatever, meet with officials on various things. We've started to do more works in particular segments or sectors. So we've maybe doing some work, for example, on self-service technology. We've been doing a lot of work on the healthcare industry and IT. We've been doing, Stephen actually has been taking the lead now on a global benchmarking study on intelligent transportation systems. So how does IT transform transportation? And obviously we've been doing smart grids. So my own view is that sort of going deeper into these sectoral questions and thinking about the entire system, or the ecosystem, if you will, and then how innovation and IT are playing out, and possibly even looking at what other countries are doing is there's a lot of value that comes from that. So short answer is we would certainly be open to thinking about collaborations along those lines.
All right, thank you.
Great,
Okay.
thanks.
Good.
Well, one point
go ahead,
let me add, just as we move from the changing nature of innovation into comparing countries' innovation capabilities. There's a wonderful study out there by a firm called Doblin that defined 10 different types of innovation. And they said you can innovate along your offering, you can innovate along your channel, you can innovate along your value chain, or you can innovate along your business model. And essentially, they spent a decade looking at the different innovations from firms and found that while 80% of firms' innovative activities occurred around the core capabilities of the product or service that the firm offered, so the core product or service attributes, 80% of innovation activity occurred there, but 80% of the innovation value occurred when firms innovated their business model or in their value chain. So I just want to really drive home that the most innovative firms today we're seeing aren't ones that are necessarily concentrating on faster feeds and speeds of the printers, but they're looking at how they can completely transform their business model and value network. So if anybody would like to see that study after this call, shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to send you more information about the business model as the key driver of innovative activity.
Stephen, how do you? I'm sure everyone's going to want a copy. So can you? How do you spell that? Did you say Doblin?
Yeah, DOBLIN.com. If you go to Doblin.com, just type in the 10 types of innovation, and
okay.
It'll pop up on their. The study won't pop up, but their definition of what the 10 types are will pop up. And if you want, email me and I'll give you the full study.
Great, thank you.
Stephen, you want to share your email? I don't know if everybody has it.
Sure. It's SEZEL@itif.org.
Great. Okay. So just to kind of move on here about given that innovation is so important and it's this big driver, where are we? Is the U.S. An innovation leader, or how are we doing? So we did this study called the Atlantic Century. We just released it in February. We looked at 40 nations and regions and tried to really assess, mostly EU and NAFTA countries, but other ones, as you can see, China, India, Korea, Singapore, others. Looked at 16 indicators, things like how much corporate R&D was being done, how many new firms, how much corporate IT investment, some other factors around productivity and the like, to try to get a handle on who's in the lead. And what we found was that the U.S. is not in the lead anymore. We're actually 6th overall. Country of Singapore, believe it or not, is number 1. I mean, they are just talking about a country that is myopically, in the good sense, focused on innovation. They are. But certainly other countries, some of them are small, but certainly Korea, I think it's a surprise that South Korea is more innovative now than the U.S., UK quite close, Japan. But the other key point, I think, as Fran alluded to at the beginning of the call, we then benchmarked where the U.S. has been in this decade, where all the countries were, around 2000, where they are in the latest year we could get data for, say 2006, 2007, and then added up all that change, if you will, and said who's made the most progress, who's seen the most improvement in corporate R&D, or the most improvement in new firms, or most improvement in productivity, and the U.S. is dead last. We have made less progress than every other nation that we looked at there, and needless to say, we find that quite troubling for the future of the country. There you can see kind of overall change. We're dead last. I won't really go through some of these. These are all on the website. You can see researchers were not doing a very good job of increasing the number of scientific researchers. Corporate R&D, where we've actually gone down for the first time in U.S. history as a share of GDP. See, by the way, countries like China and Mexico right next door to us, dramatic increases in corporate R&D. Government R&D, hardly much change at all. So I'm going to skip through that. If you're interested, those are the slides related to similar findings at the state level. It tells you what states are the most innovative, whether it's high-tech jobs or corporate R&D or the whole set of issues like that. And that's, again, on our website. So I guess just to sort of finish up then, the question is, what do we need to do? In our view, there are three big things that countries have to get right in order to be innovation powerhouses. One is you have to have a good business environment, and that means you have to have firms that are innovative, you have to have people that are willing to take risks, you have to have financial markets that are willing to support those. So you have to have a good market environment, and on that, I think the U.S. does pretty well. Notwithstanding the current financial issues we have. The second thing, you have to have a good regulatory environment to support innovation and encourage people to take risks and not punish risks. On there, we're pretty good, certainly better than Europe. But the area where I think we really are falling down is this third leg of the stool, if you will, and that's active policies to support innovation. I'll give you an example. In 1992, the U.S. had the most generous research and development tax credit in the world. We gave very large incentives for companies to do research and development. Today, we're 17th most generous of the 30 OECD nations. Every other nation just went gangbusters and said, we got to be better at this, and so we're going to do that. They did similar things with regard to their overall corporate tax rate. So a lot of these other countries now have articulated very strong national innovation strategies. Some of them, for example, include construction. So I think Finland, Stephen, is that right? Finland has a construction component, I think.
Yes, they have. Yes, they do.
Yeah, through a group called TEKES, T-E-K-E-S. So this is a study that we're going to be releasing in September in a journal here in Washington called the Democracy Journal. It's a study Stephen's done where we looked and see what have these countries done, and most of them have innovation agencies. So, for example, TEKES in Finland has a construction division that focuses on innovation in the construction sector. They work collaboratively with firms. They provide research grants. They fund university centers, probably like FIA, but that's what they do it very explicitly. They have identified national strategies. They want to lead the world in IT. They have broad mission. So essentially, other countries are doing a much better job than we are. Now, some of that may be changing. Certainly, the stimulus package put forward some money, but again, if you compare our stimulus to other countries, some other countries' stimulus, it's not as good. It's certainly better than others. So, so we would argue that essentially we need to be having a much more robust set of innovation policies. And the last component of that, I would argue, is there's going back to my very first slide. I think there's essentially this kind of very much of this kind of unproductive debate that goes on in Washington, that if you want to say anything more than just say, well, we want to get more scientists or help more money at national science, but if you're accused of industrial policy, which I don't really know what that means. I think what it means is that you're accused of somehow picking particular winners and losers and all. I think that's just a way, frankly, to end any kind of intelligent discussion or debate, and kind of with a sledgehammer. I think we actually would do very, very well in this country to have, for example, an effort somewhere, whether it's a joint effort with OSTP, Office of Science and Technology Policy, NIST, and maybe HUD, to think about the construction industry, to bring in the players like that, like you all, and say, what are the opportunities and challenges in the construction industry, and where can government play a supportive role, if at all? I mean, maybe the answer is there's nothing for government to do, but maybe government can play a role, whether it's with helping maybe with standards or with redesigning their regulations about procurement, or forcing or incenting state and local governments to change their building codes so that they enable more innovation rather than just simple kind of product standards. Or maybe it's funding research and development. But we're never really going to know those questions, I would argue, unless we take a serious look at the construction industry and say, where's it going? What are the opportunities? And again, this is, I think, what some other countries are doing, and we'll see. So I will stop. Let me see there. So anyway, so I'll stop there, and maybe we could, if there's questions now or discussion, we'd certainly be happy to continue that.
Yes, this is Fran. Recently I was out at the Smart Grid conference, And what really caught me by surprise was Bob Metcalf was there and was one of the keynote speakers. And, he has a history in IT, and strong history, inventing literally Ethernet and founder of 3Com and all that. They're completely on a different horse now. I shouldn't say completely, but he calls it the Internet, E-N-E-R-N-E-T, which is a combination of IT and, energy. And many of the people in the VC community that were there, too, are looking for investments in there. So I guess it's a question or sort of a change to see these guys move from pure IT into sort of what I'll call integration of IT. If we look at where computers have gone, they've taken us and they've originally allowed us to calculate things faster, and then we created big enterprise systems to do all the back office accounting, and then we moved into a productivity era. Now I think IT is really moving into just a very deep penetration into everything we do. And I think that's some of the wave that we're seeing there. So anyway, just sort of a comment, and I don't know if you've seen that in your work in innovation, and that IT, as we think of it today, is really in itself going through some changes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a couple of thoughts. One is we didn't put the slide on there, but it was another slide deck we have which talks about that we're moving into this new phase of IT, this what we would call this sort of fourth phase from essentially mainframe client server networks now to what we would call this smart world or intelligent planet. IBM uses the word intelligent planet. We would use the word smart world, where essentially intelligence is now being embedded in everything around us. So it's not just using your desktop or your laptop or your PDA to be involved in this, but that everything around the environment is going to be intelligent. So, for example, in Japan, the sewer manhole covers now are intelligent. They have RFID on them. Again, you can imagine sort of everything being instrumented. So I think that's a big change that's emerging, and we talk about that in that digital quality of life report. But I guess I'm a little more skeptical than Bob Metcalf in the sense of I worry that people are putting way too much emphasis on the green revolution, and that it's going to end up being a little bit of a bubble. Green is nice and it's important. I don't mean to dismiss it. We've certainly done work in that area. But if you think about smart grid, for example, you would do smart grid irregardless of whether you wanted to be green or not. I mean, the green is a component of the benefit you get from smart grid, but it's it's a part of an overall, I would argue, inexorable process of making systems intelligent. So, I mean, I was by my house the other day, and the meter reader came by, and I'm just thinking of it. The guy walks up to my meter, and now he waves a little thing at it, but I'm like, still, the guy had to come out to my house, and what a waste of total time and money and manpower. A smart meter would obviate the need for this person to have to walk by my house on a hot day and look at some piece of information. So I don't think, I would argue it's not internet. I think that's essentially marketing hype. That it really, IT is still going to be this big, powerful thing. It's still important in and of itself. And one of the nice things that it gets you is that it also will get you important energy and environmental benefits. But I don't think we're seeing the merger of them.
Nicole, you have anything?
I do not. No. Did you have any more, Fran?
Well, by the way, in their minds, too, blue is the new green. So I think as a trend, you'll start to see people shift and start to call things blue. They like that as a better color than green. And it's a broader definition. It's not just for emphasizing this massive change based on a greener planet, but also a broader perspective. I don't have any more particular questions. I would like to just make a comment and thank our presenters today, Stephen. And you mentioned this intelligent transportation study. When that gets finished, or whenever you're ready with that, we might want to have an invite to hear some of the summary on that. And I'd like to remind, I guess, our audience, we still have a couple more in this series. We have Kurt Yeager, who is one of the co-authors of Perfect Power and part of the Galvin Institute, that will talk about some of these things related to smart grid. Carol Reig from Bentley will talk about changes in education, some of the work that Bentley has done in sponsoring and working with future cities in education at various levels. And we also have him from the World Future Society, that is an organization that for a relatively low cost people can join and sort of begin to track a lot of these future things on their own. That really I think sums it up for me. I think this was a great presentation, and hopefully this will be posted, right, Nicole?
Yes, Fran. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So and I would encourage people to visit the website. Rob and Steve, I thank you again. And Nicole, do you have any other closing remarks?
No, I just wanted to remind people that we will have a copy of the presentation and the recording and a copy of that report, if I can get it from Stephen, on our website later this week.
Yes, no problem. Thank you, Fran and Nicole. And if anyone on the call would like to follow up and request any of the presentations or reports that Rob has mentioned, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'll get them to you, or you can find them on our website.